Jung made a discovery so unsettling that he rarely spoke of it directly. 73% of his most dangerous patients revealed one identical warning sign, a red flag so subtle, so well hidden, that it disguised itself behind kindness, charm, even apparent innocence. On the surface, these people looked harmless. But beneath the mask, something monstrous stirred. And Jung's warning was chillingly clear. The moment you recognize this sign, retreat immediately, or you may not survive intact. The sign emerges when someone begins projecting their shadow onto others, not as speculation, not as suspicion, but with absolute, unshakable conviction. Most people think projection is just psychology speak. They're wrong. It is a warning siren of human danger, a psychological landmine waiting to detonate. In 1913, Jung encountered a patient who would forever alter his understanding of human darkness. This man was magnetic, articulate, and appeared deeply caring. But behind his mask of warmth was a creeping horror. Jung noticed that everyone this man condemned as evil shared the same suspicious traits. They weren't strangers' flaws. They were his own. The man wasn't misjudging people. He was systematically offloading his hidden darkness onto everyone around him. The result was catastrophic. Within 6 months, 3 relationships destroyed, 2 colleagues ruined, a brother driven to breakdown. All the while, the patient stood untouched, cloaked in the spotless armor of victimhood. Jung realized he wasn't witnessing misunderstanding. He was staring directly into the most destructive psychological weapon in existence. Jung called it the most dangerous mechanism in the human psyche, not because it announces itself with rage or violence, but because it hides inside ordinary people, polite, charming, often admired, and then one day it erupts. When a person begins to project their shadow with absolute conviction, something terrifying happens. Their mind rewrites reality itself. Modern neuroscience has revealed what Jung intuited. The brain doesn't just misinterpret. It forges delusion. Neural networks ignite as if in hallucination. The projector doesn't believe they're lying. They see their distortion as truth. And worse, they drag others into their twisted reality until the air itself feels poisoned. Jung documented case after case where one shadow projector could tear apart reputations, relationships, entire communities. Not through violence, but through conviction. They become prophets of a false reality, and those around them believe. The 5 warning signs. Jung gave us 5 unmistakable signs that this danger is near. And when you see them together, you must understand, you are standing at the edge of a psychological abyss. Sign 1. Absolute certainty. They claim to know your thoughts, your motives, your hidden sins with unwavering conviction. They don't wonder, they decree. Sign 2. Immunity to evidence. Every explanation, every proof you offer, becomes twisted into further confirmation of their delusion. Logic is no weapon here. It is fuel for their fire. Sign 3. Emotional intensity. Their rage, fear, or disgust burns wildly out of proportion to the facts. The emotion belongs not to you, but to the monster inside them they cannot face. Sign 4. The eternal victim. They are forever betrayed, forever wounded, forever persecuted. The faces of their so-called oppressors change, but their script never does. Sign 5. Recruitment. They whisper their distorted vision to others. What begins as a private accusation becomes a shared belief, and soon, an entire circle of people sees you through their poisoned lens. When these 5 converge, you are no longer in conflict with a person. You are trapped in a psychic storm, a storm that will not stop until something is destroyed. The escalation. Jung mapped the pattern. First, the subtle accusations, small, almost laughable misperceptions. Then, the crystallization, certainty hardens, and every gesture you make is judged as evidence. Next comes distortion. Your reality disappears behind their projection. Soon after, recruitment begins. Allies, family, co-workers pulled into their orbit. Then, collective possession, many minds seeing you not as you are, but as their shadow paints you. Finally, systematic exclusion. You are cut off, condemned, erased. This is how reputations vanish. This is how families fracture. This is how entire communities feed on a lie until the innocent are devoured. Jung believed that shadow projection was only the beginning. There were other states, darker still, that revealed the terrifying potential of the human psyche when it strays too far from consciousness. One of these was ego inflation. Unlike the projector who warps reality unconsciously, the inflated person steps forward as if illuminated by divine fire. They are utterly convinced of their own righteousness. They do not wonder, they do not hesitate, they do not question. To them, dissent is not a difference of opinion, it is rebellion against truth itself. Their charisma is magnetic, their confidence hypnotic. People follow them willingly, unable to see the destruction that inevitably follows in their wake. Jung warned that while such individuals eventually collapse under the unbearable weight of their delusion, before they fall they scorch everything around them. Then there were those who hid behind the perfect mask, the ones Jung described as completely identified with their social persona. These people devote their entire being to maintaining an immaculate image. They smile flawlessly, speak flawlessly, live flawlessly. But beneath the mask, their denied impulses boil like molten rock beneath a fragile crust. When the mask finally cracks, it does not slip gently. It explodes with all the fury of the repressed shadow erupting at once. The more perfect the performance, the more devastating the breakdown when it arrives. Perhaps most chilling of all was what Jung called archetypal possession. In this state, the individual self vanishes and something vast, ancient, and inhuman takes its place. Their voice changes, their eyes shift, and the energy around them becomes uncanny. They may appear as the eternal victim, the righteous warrior, the savior, or the divine parent. At first, these figures can seem inspiring, even holy. But archetypes carry both light and shadow, saint and fanatic, savior and tyrant. Once a person becomes a vessel for this power, they inevitably swing toward its destructive pole. They may commit acts completely at odds with their conscious values and later find themselves unable to explain what has moved through them. The final danger Jung mapped was quieter, but no less ruinous. He called it the compulsion to repeat. Some people are trapped in endless loops of suffering, endlessly replaying the same betrayals, abandonments, and cruelties across different lives and relationships. Each time the faces change, but the script remains the same. They are convinced they are victims of fate, when in truth they are architects of their own cycles. And in order to keep the pattern alive, they pull others into the drama, assigning roles of villain, betrayer, or persecutor. If you step too close, you find yourself trapped inside their story, a story written long before you appeared, and no amount of protest frees you. Jung called this negative synchronicity, the unconscious orchestrating its own nightmare again and again until someone finally breaks the cycle. Against dangers like these, Jung offered no easy comfort. The only shield, he said, was awareness. You must trust your own reality even when another's description of you feels suffocating. You must resist the temptation to argue, because argument only feeds their certainty. You must limit what you share, because every detail can be twisted into evidence. And sometimes the most important move is the simplest one: withdrawal. To refuse to play the game at all. Jung's words remain as unsettling now as when he first wrote them. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Those who cannot do this will find their darkness unbearable, and they will cast it onto others, forcing the people around them to carry what they refuse to see in themselves. The real danger is not that these people are malicious, it is that they are utterly unconscious. They believe their distortions with all their heart, and in doing so, they can turn entire families, workplaces, even whole communities into instruments of their delusion. To recognize these patterns is to step outside their jurisdiction. Awareness is freedom. It is the only light strong enough to pierce the psychological storm that Jung spent his life mapping. The warning is clear, and it is timeless. When you see the signs, do not explain, do not fight, do not wait. Leave. For the most dangerous people are not those who know their darkness, but those who are consumed by it while believing themselves pure. Jung did not map these territories to frighten us for their own sake. His purpose was survival. He wanted us to recognize that human beings carry within them forces older than reason, older than morality, older even than civilization itself. These forces, when left unconscious, move through us like predators wearing our faces. The true danger is not out there in the world, but inside, the unseen shadow that each of us bears. The tragedy, Jung realized, is that those who refuse to confront their own darkness become its servants. They protect their fragile image of goodness by sacrificing others, making scapegoats of anyone who reminds them of what they cannot admit. History itself is littered with these projections. Wars, persecutions, witch hunts, inquisitions, purges, all fueled by shadows disowned and then cast onto others. Whole societies can be possessed, entire nations swept into hysteria, and millions destroyed, all because unconscious content was unleashed without recognition. Yet the same forces that destroy can also transform. Jung believed that if one dares to face the shadow consciously, if one can endure the terror of acknowledging one's own cruelty, selfishness, envy, and rage, then these powers lose their destructive grip. What once erupted as projection can become raw material for growth. What once disguised itself as holy certainty can be tempered into humility. What once repeated endlessly as compulsion can finally be broken. But such work is not easy. To confront the shadow is to stand before the abyss and admit, I am not only what I want to be. I am also everything I fear and despise. Most people cannot bear that revelation. And so they choose blindness, letting their darkness seep into the world in unconscious patterns, harming everyone around them. For Jung, this was the ultimate threshold. He believed that civilization itself depended on whether individuals were willing to take this step. If we fail, the shadow rises collectively, amplified by millions of unconscious projections until it takes the shape of tyrants, mobs, and wars. If we succeed, then something extraordinary happens. The energy once trapped in repression becomes available for creation, imagination, and wholeness. But the warning remains. When you meet someone who cannot see themselves, someone whose certainty drowns out reality, whose innocence feels too spotless, whose charisma demands surrender, remember what Jung discovered. Beneath their mask lies not safety but danger. Protect yourself not by entering their delusion, but by standing firm in your own awareness. For consciousness is the only ground that cannot be stolen. And so Jung left us with a paradox. The most dangerous sign in another is also the most dangerous truth in ourselves. The refusal to accept the shadow. To recognize this in others is to guard your life. To recognize it in yourself is to guard your soul. The refusal to face the shadow does not simply distort an individual's life. It breeds a contagion. Jung observed how one unconscious psyche could infect others, spreading distortion like a fever. Families turned against their own. Entire workplaces revolved around invisible accusations. Communities collapsed under waves of paranoia. Once the projection gained momentum, truth itself became irrelevant. The group's shared delusion replaced reality, and anyone who resisted was silenced or destroyed. This phenomenon terrified Jung, because it revealed that madness was not confined to asylums. Madness could sweep across whole societies when enough people abandoned the task of self-examination. He watched Europe descend into such possession during the rise of fascism, where entire nations projected their denied shadows onto scapegoated groups, convinced by the absolute certainty of their distorted visions. To Jung, this was not history, it was psychology scaled to monstrous proportions. Yet the danger was not only political or collective, it was intimate. He saw how projection could annihilate marriages, how inflation could corrupt friendships, how persona could suffocate children raised under the weight of a parent's perfection, how archetypal possession could turn a lover into a zealot. He knew that the most devastating psychological wounds were not inflicted by strangers, but by those closest to us, who unconsciously recruited us into their inner wars. In his clinical work, Jung recorded countless cases where patients destroyed those they loved most, not out of hatred but out of blindness. They could not admit to themselves that they carried envy, cruelty, lust, or rage, and so they saw these traits only in the people around them. Every attempt at explanation failed, because the projector's mind had already rewritten reality. To argue with them was like arguing with a dream. They were immune to reason because they were no longer inside reason. They were inside possession. And once possession took hold, it was nearly impossible to stop. Jung described it as a chain reaction. The more one denied their own darkness, the stronger the projection became. The stronger the projection, the more others were drawn into its field. The more people drawn in, the more the delusion hardened until it became indistinguishable from truth. The innocent target was gradually stripped of their voice, their reputation, even their sanity, until they doubted themselves entirely. What began as one person's unconscious conflict became a collective execution. Jung's writings pulse with urgency here. He was not describing abstract ideas. He was describing what he witnessed daily in his patients, in his society, and in himself. He admitted that no one escapes the shadow. Each of us is vulnerable to the temptation of projection. Each of us carries the seeds of inflation. Each of us wears a mask that threatens to consume us. The danger is universal, and therefore the responsibility is universal. The only difference between those who destroy and those who transform is whether they are willing to confront what they fear in themselves. Those who refuse become walking catastrophes. Those who accept become rare carriers of awareness, able to withstand the contagion of unconsciousness. Jung often turned to his case notes to illustrate these forces in motion. One patient, outwardly refined and deeply respected, spoke with eloquence about the corruption and dishonesty of his colleagues. He described them as liars, manipulators, schemers. Yet Jung, listening carefully, recognized the patterns. The man was not uncovering truth. He was rehearsing his own hidden qualities, spitting them into the faces of others. Within a year, the patient's life was in ruins. The very manipulations he had condemned erupted from him in secret dealings and betrayals, while he continued to cast himself as the injured party. The tragedy was not his duplicity, but his blindness. He could not see himself, and in that blindness he destroyed everything that tethered him to sanity. Another patient lived inside the mask of perfection. To outsiders, she was flawless, her manners impeccable, her social standing secure, her every action beyond reproach. Yet Jung sensed the hollowness beneath the surface. When the mask finally broke, it did not slip, it exploded. Years of denied rage and unacknowledged desire surged forth, devastating her family. In the wreckage, Jung saw the principle confirmed. The brighter the mask, the darker the eruption when it finally tears away. These patterns were not confined to individuals. Jung watched entire communities become possessed. He described how, during political upheavals, friends turned on friends, neighbors accused neighbors, and whole towns were swept into mass hysteria. He compared it to an ancient plague of the mind, moving invisibly but leaving devastation in its wake. People did not believe they were projecting, they believed they were defending truth itself. And because of their conviction, they recruited others, building networks of delusion until entire populations were consumed. The wars of the 20th century shook Jung to his core. He saw in them the collective shadow of nations unleashed. He wrote that the horrors of mass violence were not the product of demons or fate, but of unconscious psychology spilling onto the world stage. The persecution of scapegoated groups, the rise of dictators, the frenzy of mobs, all of it followed the same pattern he had witnessed in his consulting room, only magnified 1,000 times. The unconscious, denied at the personal level, had swelled into catastrophe at the collective level. What terrified him most was how ordinary the participants were. Not monsters, not madmen, ordinary men and women who had surrendered their capacity for reflection. They fused with archetypes of purity, vengeance, nation, or God, and in that possession, they committed atrocities they later insisted they had never truly chosen. Jung realized that the shadow, once denied, does not vanish. It grows teeth. It hunts. And when it finds no recognition within, it turns outward, searching for victims to carry its weight. This was why Jung's warning always returned to the same chilling point. The real danger is not evil intentions. The real danger is unconsciousness. The man convinced of his innocence is far more perilous than the one who admits his faults. The woman who believes she has transcended her shadow is infinitely more destructive than the one who struggles to acknowledge it. For those who know their darkness can restrain it. Those who deny it will unleash it upon the world with holy conviction. Jung warned that what he saw in patients, he also saw mirrored in civilizations. Religions consumed by their own shadows persecuted in the name of purity. Nations, blind to their flaws, projecting evil outward and waging wars against reflections of themselves. Political movements collapsing into fanaticism, convinced of their righteousness while carrying out unspeakable acts. Collective possession was always the same story told on a larger stage. A refusal to look inward, turned outward into destruction. For Jung, these were not merely historical events but living symbols of what happens when unconscious forces rule unchecked. The shadow, denied in the heart of one person, poisons their family. Denied in millions, it poisons the world. He saw in the rise of totalitarianism the same 5 warning signs he had written about in individuals. Certainty that brooked no doubt, immunity to evidence, wild emotional intensity, victimhood narratives, and the relentless recruitment of others into the delusion. When these qualities appear in a single person, they can ruin lives. When they appear in a nation, they can ruin history. And yet, Jung never abandoned the belief that awareness could break the spell. To see the shadow is to rob it of its destructive secrecy. To accept one's darkness is to prevent it from possessing others. He called this task individuation, the long, difficult process of becoming whole. Few attempt it, fewer still succeed. But for those who do, the shadow loses its teeth. The unconscious ceases to rule from the shadows, and the cycle of projection begins to dissolve. Most, however, cannot face this. They recoil from the abyss within, insisting they are pure, insisting they are victims, insisting their enemies are everywhere but in the mirror. These are the people Jung called most dangerous, not because they are evil but because they are blind. Their blindness becomes a weapon, their certainty a poison, their innocence a mask that hides catastrophe. So when you meet such a person, when their perception of you feels alien and twisted, when their certainty drowns out reason, when their charisma begins to recruit others into a storm you did not create, remember Jung's warning. Do not fight their dream. Do not feed their delusion. Walk away. Survival lies in recognition, not in argument. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Those who refuse will make you carry their shadow. Those who dare will free themselves and perhaps the world around them. And if you've made it this far, you've seen the danger clearly. Stay conscious. Stay awake. Protect yourself from the shadows of others. And from your own. If this message opened your eyes, you know what to do. Like this video. Subscribe for more. And remember, awareness is not just power. In a